The interrelationship and interaction between art and culture is apparent in European landscape painting as well. The same tropes were used in both forms of expression. These forms of cultural expression depict the desires, dreams, and sometimes the realities of that culture. Truths that relied heavily on binary oppositions were also expressed in painting. Linear perspective was the grid on which three-dimensional space was defined on the two-dimensional surface of most European paintings. And linear perspective is just a way artists used to make it look like buildings are disappearing in the distant things like that. Like it's something that you learn in first-year drawing class. Okay, wilderness scenes that have been emptied of any indigenous presence were common subjects. The strong light of God seems to shine through, lighting the landscape in brilliant clarity. And this is a work by Lauren Harris. He's a Canadian artist, I think around early part of the century. The land has been emptied, made into a Garden of Eden, right for European settlement and expansion. And American painters around this time actually did use light as a metaphor for God. So it was there. It wasn't. It's not something that you look at and say it looks like God's in the painting. They did use it as a metaphor for God coming into the land. Much like the maps that disregarded indigenous presence. If Native people were presented, it was in terms of the buffalo hunt. And there's literally thousands of paintings and etchings and works like this of Native people at the buffalo hunt, at war, or to document dying cultures. In much of today's commercial art, the land, animals, and indigenous people have turned into sentimental scenes that do not speak to past histories or conflicts. Ideology has not shifted much in these forms of cultural expression, other than the landscape has now been made safe by European supervision. And this is, I think it's an artist from, I think he's either from Manitoba or Saskatchewan. Contemporary Métis artists are challenging these ideas in their art. They are expressing a different experience with culture and land. Through many of the presentations, will have heard or will be hearing about how we as people have lived on the land prior to the later influx of European expansion. As a people of dual culture, so has been our relationship with this place, part nomadic hunter, part farmer. There is a link between these economic strategies and our worldview. This place has been the source of Métis identity in the form of medicines, food, clothing, religious belief, history, and artistic expression. Many Métis artists today tend to deal with the land from a different perspective. The word landscape does not seem to fit when discussing Métis art. The term landscape is defined as a natural or imaginary scenery, as seen in a broad view, having a rectangular shape with the width greater than the height. It implies a sweeping panoramic view as seen through the eyes of conquest and ownership. Surveillance for the sake of order and control. This word does not seem to fit into the context of Métis identity. Place or location seems to be more suitable. It implies an attachment, bonding, and history. As with Western European cultural expression, Métis artistic expression reveals a unique cultural and ideological position. Contemporary Métis artists are approaching the idea of land or place in unique ways. The works of Edward Poitras challenge the relationship between settler population and indigenous communities through the questioning of history and propaganda. And this is from an exhibition called Homelands, and I think it was at Kamloops and the Confederation Art Gallery. His work uproots what we are taught and led to believe by mainstream society about the historical settlement of the land. And there's one more of his, and there's an image of Louis Riel on there. The last one. That one's sideways, sorry. Okay. Roger Crate's Uncontrolled Cityscapes depict a chaotic environment marked by catastrophe that reflects our present-day global reality. One thing I'm going to say about having slides for most of these artists, there's not a lot of, Christy touched on it, there's not a lot of study, there's not a lot of historical reference. So when I go looking for slides of Métis artists to show if I'm teaching or something, they're just not available. And so these I had to take from a book. Okay, so we are a society in flux affected by worldwide events. He is aware of the racism and difference that he faces living in an urban environment. The photography of Duncan Murdoch shows the reality of inner city life. Christy Belcourt's Flora work reveals an attachment to the land and evolution of beating on the painted surface. Her work speaks of a deep attachment to the land and living things. The works of David Hannon ties past generations with the present. He links his personal family history combined with historical images showing that all are connected, future and past. My own work is influenced by land management effects on our lived experiences. All these artists speak from the Métis perspective, reflected in the position they take in their work. The work challenges, supports, and expresses a unique view of the land identity and experience. Moreover, the first step in the settlement process was to map a region. Mapping was a means to grasp and control. It acted as the means to an end. The belief in an inevitable progress of civilization can now be understood as a carefully planned and executed as the maps that became the blueprints for European settlement on the prairies. Mapping was a vehicle to create a place where people of European descent could feel comfortable and at home. It was a method to gain control over populations and economies through territory. Location shapes one's identity in subtle yet consistent ways. Location is the keeper of our history. It holds the bones and stories of past generations. It maintains the reality of our present through our homes, work, and communities. It is the promise of the future through the lives of the next generations. The pull and attachment to place is wrapped up in all these things and more. The way we explain and understand land, territory, and nation reflect our cultural beliefs and systems. In summation, mapping and art are the external expressions of our internal concept of place and how we inhabit the world. Moreover, mapping, that division of land and nations, has altered our existence worldwide. And this is just a photograph of Lower Ontario, and it's from a satellite view, and you can see how the land has been mapped. It is a system of control that has gained in global acceptance. It is a blueprint of our physical experience of the world. It has defined our experience as Métis people. Ours is a history of displacement, despite the fact that we still inhabit the place of our predecessors. Fortunately, mapping has not extinguished links to the places that we have occupied. Batoche, Lake St. Anne, and St. Laurent are still places of significance. These places, though mapped, still provide a place for identity that maintain our attachment to this place. Thank you.